At 5:30 a.m. on July 16, 1945, a bomb goes off in the middle of the New Mexico desert in the United States. However, this bomb going off isn't like any other. For the first time ever, a nuclear weapon had been put through its paces. Trinity was the code name for this nuclear test, and J was in charge of the project, the physicist Robert Oppenheimer. This explosive explosion stunned Oppenheimer. He estimated that the explosion would be equivalent to about 0.3 kilotons of TNT. This bomb, however, was actually 50 times deadlier, approximately 15 to 20 kilotons of TNT. A steel tower vaporized due to the intense heat produced by the explosion. At a distance of 160 kilometers, the shockwave could be felt. The height of the mushroom cloud reached 12 kilometers into the sky. Oppenheimer was so taken aback by what he saw that he spoke a few words. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Since Christopher Nolan recently released a film about him, I thought it would be a good time to do a video on Julius Robert Oppenheimer, also known as the father of the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer led the Manhattan Project, which developed the first nuclear bomb. He was born into a German Jewish family in New York City, and he has been regarded as a genius ever since. He began studying advanced physics and chemistry at the age of 10, and he is also well-versed in mineralogy. He was so knowledgeable that at the age of 12 he was invited to give a lecture at New York's Mineralogical Club. Later in 1922, when he went to Harvard to study, he completed his 4-year degree in 3 years. He was at the top of his class, he majored in chemistry, and he was knowledgeable about many subjects: physics, philosophy, literature, and even Eastern religion. But in Harvard he realized that among all these subjects, his real passion was physics. Later in 1927, at the age of 23, he did his PhD. But there was a dark side hidden behind this genius. His friends said that Oppenheimer had self-destructive tendencies. He was a chain smoker and was suffering from depression. One day, he told his brother, "I need physics more than friends." He was focused only on his studies and remained unaware of what was happening in the world around him. Until the early 1930s, when Adolf Hitler rose in Germany. He gradually became more politically aware. Because of Hitler's tyranny, many German scientists were fleeing from Germany to America. There were many big names on this list, like Albert Einstein, John von Neumann, who pioneered modern computers, Leo Szilard, who will play an important role in our story, Hans Bethe discovered fusion in stars, Edward Teller, who is called the father of the hydrogen bomb, and Enrico Fermi, who will play another important role in our story. All these scientists were mainly German Jewish, and because Oppenheimer himself came from a German Jewish family, when he started paying attention to the atrocities on Jews, his interest in politics started developing. This is his quote from 1936, "I started to understand how political and economic events deeply affect people's lives. Due to my exposure to leftist ideas, I felt compelled to join this group." In September of 1939, he attended numerous political events and gave generously to numerous labor groups and striking farm workers. Hitler's invasion of Poland marked the official start of World War II. As I discussed in my video overview of the conflict, the United States had no intention of joining the conflict. Before World War II even began, in August of 1939, Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard wrote a letter to American President Franklin D. Roosevelt in which they warned him that Hitler was working on nuclear weapons and that he might be successful in making this extremely powerful bomb. Roosevelt acted swiftly, forming an advisory committee on uranium. Based on the report of this committee, the United States government began funding the work of Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard to study nuclear chain reactions and develop methods for isolating the more desirable isotope, uranium-235, from the more common uranium-238. Could be used to make the bomb. The first challenge for these scientists was to find a way to make uranium-235 using the uranium-238. However, the scientists working on this project were told not to tell Albert Einstein anything, because the American government was afraid that Albert Einstein's ideology was very left-wing. It could have been a potential security risk. Oppenheimer was doing his independent research on nuclear fission with Edward Teller and other scientists. December 1940. Apart from the uranium-235 isotope, another radioactive element was discovered which scientists believe could also be used to make nuclear weapons. The name of this element was plutonium. On 11 October 1941, American president sent a message to British Prime Minister Winston Churchill saying that both countries should collaborate for atomic development. Not even 2 months later, on 7 December 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and America officially entered World War II. American President Roosevelt announced that America would become a part of the Allied powers who were fighting against Germany and Japan. But at this point in time, it becomes clear that the scientific mission of developing nuclear weapons had turned into a military mission. America spent $2.2 billion on this one project. Taking inflation into account, it is equivalent to $24 billion today. The American military had an engineering wing, the Army Corps of Engineers. It made ports and airfields for the Army. Its involvement was approved by President Roosevelt in June 1942. Now, the office of the North Atlantic Division was in Manhattan, New York City. And when they got the responsibility to make nuclear weapons, they made their headquarters in the same building, on the 18th floor. These headquarters were named Manhattan Engineer District, and from this point in time, the Manhattan Project officially started. The date was 13th August 1942. Next month, on 17th September, Colonel Leslie Richard Groves was appointed as the head of the project, and he made the decision to appoint Oppenheimer as the leader of the design of the atomic bomb. A secret location was decided to keep this project under cover: Oak Ridge, Tennessee. This city is also called the Secret City because an entire city was built here only for this project. Thousands of scientists, researchers, and workers were moved to this city, and they had only one task: creating uranium-235 from uranium-238. The point is that uranium-238 is not very fissionable. It cannot undergo a chain reaction to make a bomb. It was very important to extract uranium-235. Only uranium-235 can undergo a chain reaction, which is why it was required. The plan was to try out 4 different methods to make U-235 from U-238: gaseous diffusion, centrifuge, electromagnetic separation, and liquid thermal diffusion. After testing these 4 different technologies, 2 technologies proved to be successful to some extent: electromagnetic separation and gaseous diffusion. In electromagnetic separation, a large magnet is used to separate U-235 from U-238. In gaseous diffusion, uranium hexafluoride gas is passed through a porous membrane in which the light molecules of U-235 pass successfully. But since the U-238 molecules are heavier, they get filtered out. Apart from this, at a different location in Washington, scientists were at work producing plutonium as well. Plutonium is also produced from uranium-238. When an isotope of hydrogen is bombarded with uranium-238, then plutonium is produced. Later it was found that plutonium is more radioactive and more fissionable as compared to uranium-235. Apart from these 2 locations, they were looking for a 3rd location, for Project Y, a location where the actual work of designing and making these bombs would take place. General Groves wanted a remote location for this, so that the project could remain a secret. Oppenheimer knew exactly such a location. It is a place where Oppenheimer spent his summers happily. Surrounded by mountains and beautiful landscapes, the Pecos Valley is in New Mexico. After setting up all these locations, there was only one obvious thing left to do: to practically test out a chain reaction. Everything was theoretical till now. So they needed proof of whether the whole concept of the atomic bomb was feasible or not. 2 December 1942. Scientist Enrico Fermi conducted the first successful practical experiment. In a squash court at the University of Chicago, he ran a chain reaction, which helps light up a bulb. The clickety-clack of their instruments proved they had achieved the first human-made nuclear chain reaction. By this point, General Groves was impressed with Oppenheimer's ability. He wanted to appoint him as the director of Project Y. However, some senior members of the military doubted Oppenheimer, in the same way that they doubted Albert Einstein. Many friends of Oppenheimer, his wife, and in fact his brother, were all hardcore communists. He was influenced by the left-wing ideology himself. America was afraid that this communist ideology could go against their country. But despite these concerns, General Groves personally supported Oppenheimer and said that this project could not happen without Oppenheimer, and that he was essential for this project. Because of this, on 20th July 1943, Oppenheimer was made the lead of this project. To make an atom bomb, Oppenheimer's expertise was required in the calculation of critical mass. Critical mass is basically a minimum amount of mass of uranium-235 or plutonium, which is needed to have a chain reaction, to sustain a chain reaction. The minimum amount of radioactive elements would be needed to carry out a chain reaction and a bomb blast. It seems easy today, but there were many unknown factors at that time. We hardly knew anything about the properties of uranium-235. Plutonium-239 was actually discovered in 1940, and by the end of 1943, only 2 milligrams of plutonium could be produced. That's why America was developing 2 atom bombs. The first bomb was based on uranium-235, named Little Boy. The mechanism of this bomb was basically a gun-type design. 2 masses of uranium-235 were taken, which were subcritical, less than the critical value, and they were combined rapidly with each other. With this combination, the critical mass was reached, and a fission chain reaction followed, resulting in an explosion. The second bomb was the plutonium bomb, which was using plutonium-239, and its name was Fat Man. It was more difficult to design. Here, it could not be designed as a gun because if the masses of 2 plutonium were combined, it would react very quickly, and the fission reaction would end before the critical mass could be reached. Here, scientists created a different design for the plutonium bomb. The mass of plutonium was to be placed under high pressure and density in a spherical structure. A subcritical mass of plutonium was placed inside a hollow sphere, and outside the sphere, explosives were used to create an implosion in the mass of plutonium. When the explosives outside exploded, the plutonium would be under high pressure and it would reach the critical mass. This concept was called the implosion method. Scientists already knew about the gun method, but this was the first time that the implosion method was theoretically mentioned. Oppenheimer believed that it was necessary to test it out before actually putting it in the bomb. General Groves said that they couldn't test such things because they had produced only a small amount of plutonium. But Oppenheimer was adamant that the test was necessary, so General Groves had to finally agree. And then, friends, the Trinity test was conducted. I talked about this at the beginning of the video. In the desert of New Mexico, a test nuclear bomb was dropped. This test bomb was called Gadget. It contained 13 pounds of plutonium. Scientists hung Gadget 100ft in the air using a steel tower. And on 16 July 1945, at 5:30 a.m., this bomb was detonated. As I told you, this bomb was much more powerful than Oppenheimer expected. The steel tower completely evaporated. After the bomb blast, a mildly radioactive green-colored glass was formed, which was named trinitite. It was after seeing this blast that Oppenheimer said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another. Less than a month after the Trinity test, on 6 August 1945, the Little Boy bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. If that wasn't enough, then 3 days later, this plutonium Fat Man bomb was dropped on Nagasaki too. What was the effect of dropping these atomic bombs? Albert Einstein's first reaction upon hearing this news was, "Woe is me." A wistful remark attributed to Albert Einstein. Mankind invented the atomic bomb, but no mouse would ever construct a mousetrap. After the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Oppenheimer was ecstatic in the hopes that it could be used against Nazi Germany and Hitler. However, he was shocked by the bomb's use on Nagasaki. He met with the Secretary of War in Washington on August 17th to personally deliver a letter he had written in which he stated his desire to ban nuclear weapons and expressed deep regret for his role in developing and transferring the knowledge behind them to humanity. Oppenheimer considered the first bomb dropped on Hiroshima as a necessary evil, but now he was afraid for the future. What will different countries do with this technology in the future? In the meantime, in April 1945, American President Roosevelt passed away. The next American president was Harry Truman. 2 months after the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, Oppenheimer got a chance to meet President Truman. When meeting the president, he said directly, "I have blood on my hands." And President Truman was so angry after hearing this that he started shouting at him. He told his secretary to throw Oppenheimer out of the office and that he didn't want to see his face ever again. Oppenheimer later worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission to stop other such nuclear attacks. He wanted to establish control over nuclear weapons. In 1949, when President Truman approached the commission with the idea of making a hydrogen bomb, Oppenheimer strongly opposed it. However, this opposition was of no use because America developed a hydrogen bomb later and also conducted tests in 1952. Edward Teller was the scientist who helped in making this hydrogen bomb. He is called the father of the hydrogen bomb today. Because of Oppenheimer's resistance and his left-wing ideology, his job was snatched away from him. He spent the rest of his life in the academic profession and used to give lectures all